A warm welcome to each of you, everyone who's here in person today, everyone who's online. Such a treat to see all of us gathered here together. It's wonderful. Wonderful. And so I'm Dhammadipa, and this is Sunday Sounds of Dhamma. And before I get started with the usual program, I have a couple of announcements. So, para las personas que buscaban interpretación en español, no va a haber interpretación hoy. Claudia tiene otro compromiso, así que lo siento. Y si quieren quedarse e intentar en inglés, está muy bien, ¿no? Also, we have the class in Spanish starting next week on Tuesday nights, a study of self and non-self, hosted by San Francisco Zen Center. I might actually do that one in English too, later next year. And we have possibly one of the most important things that we do in Sangha is the ceremony where people take the ethical precepts. So that's happening on November 24th. And everyone's welcome to attend. And whether you are interested in taking them yourself or just curious about what that looks like, you're welcome to come, either online or in person. So that'll be happening. That's a Sunday, so that'll be happening instead of the regular Dharma talk on the 24th. And what else? Many other things. In December, we'll start the virtual art tours. And those are drop-in workshops where I'm going to do some presentations based on the studies that I did in London over the course of the last year for my MA in Buddhist art history. So those, I'm really looking forward to sharing that material with you all. And so those are the announcements for today. And we'll leave some time for Dana at the end there. But for now, we're going to go ahead and begin. This is Nino, our newest resident of the vihara. And please don't hesitate to let me know if Nino is disturbing you. If you're allergic, we can always put him in the guest room for a little while. He can take a nap. But anyway, the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma, so about 10 minutes of guided meditation. And then I'll offer a Dharma talk, and then there'll be plenty of time for reflections and questions. And so this morning, as it's been a busy morning, I think I would like to share our practice on the 4 elements to help us really settle in our bodies in these places where we are. So you can begin to settle into your upright meditation posture. And if you haven't already muted your mics, folks who are online, please go ahead and do that now. Thank you. So the idea here is just to allow a little gentle release of any tension or any tendency to lean toward the computer or to one side. And allow the body to find its balance. If you're lying down, meditating, lying down, you can just think about aligning the bones of the spine. And sensing the weight of the body on your seat or on your supports. Releasing the belly and really allowing the body to settle right here. And opening the attention to the whole body at once. Body from head to toe. And sensing that firmness, the solidity of the body as earth element. Tuning into that natural stability of the body. And once again, becoming aware of the supports, earth element beneath you. Solidity and firmness beneath you. Perhaps by now you're becoming aware of the air element also. Air element as oxygen throughout the body. You can feel that exchange happening moment by moment. Internal air element becomes external air element. To the lightness and the spaciousness of air as this body. So beginning with the homage to the Buddha and the Triple Gem. If you know it, you're welcome to chant along, and folks online, please keep your mics muted. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. It's true now, and it has always been true about humanity, that there are all sorts of different views in the world. Some people are elated by the way that things are. Some people are despairing. Some people have all sorts of different ideas, right? About the way that things should be or could be, or even our understanding of the way that things are is quite different from person to person. And when I think about that in the context of the teachings, one thing that I notice is that folks sometimes struggle with how to understand views, how to work with their own views and the views of others. And it's here that there's often a lot of misunderstanding about the teaching of non-attachment. I hear this quite often. People completely abandon their own understanding or abandon others because they believe that the teaching of non-attachment of Buddhism means that we can't have a view, that we can't have an opinion or a perspective. And you hear this quite strongly in certain teachings. You hear this setting down the views or going beyond the views. And that is most certainly necessary in order to experience nibbana, or nirvana in Sanskrit. I almost said in Spanish. It's nibbana in Pali and nirvana in Sanskrit. And but in order to experience nibbana, all things must be set down, not just ideas or concepts or views. So that's really a special case, you could say. Oh, it totally reminds me. I hadn't been planning on talking about this, but it totally reminds me of the koan story. So koans are these generally from Tang Dynasty China, stories that got passed on over the centuries among the various Mahayana and Zen, especially, traditions. And there's a story in which the teacher approaches the student who's working in the kitchen, and he says, "Do you throw out the sand? Do you separate the sand from the rice? Or do you separate the rice from the sand?" And the student says, "I throw out both the sand and the rice." And the teacher says, "Well, then what will the community eat?" And that's what that koan is talking about. So what about views? How do we work with this? So there's a beautiful sutta that says something about this, of course, because the Buddha, just as we do, lived in a time where in a place where there were a lot of views about the spiritual path, about how to organize human beings, about the value of life, about all sorts of things that we also struggle with today, right? Mm. And so I'm not going to tell you the title of the sutta until I tell you a little bit more about it, because I think it'll start to all kind of fit together. But this is a sutta from the middle length discourses. And so that means that we won't go over the whole thing today, because there isn't that kind of time. But there is a particular piece of it. And in this sutta, to say, the Buddha starts out by defining the middle way. And he defines the middle way actually in 3 different ways in the discourses. There's not just one way. But the first one actually that he taught and that he teaches again here in this sutta is the middle way between mortifying the body, or actually harming the body, trying to suppress the body in some way, and between a total sense indulgence, a life of just pursuing moment after moment after moment of whatever is pleasant to the senses. And he says, we need to find some other balance there. We need to not be so driven by either one of those 2 extremes. And the extreme of mortifying the body might seem to be one that, you can't relate to, but it does still happen today, About a year ago or so, I was reading an article in one of the newspapers, I think it was the New York Times, about bodybuilders who were dying because they were doing such extreme practices of eating and drinking and working out, And I thought, wow, that's really tragic, that way of understanding how to get what you're looking for in your life. So don't think that it can't happen to you or to people of this day. It was also true in the Buddhist time, and it's still happening today. But of course, to say about being driven by sense desires, that's this is like where to even start with that one. So I won't go down that path right now, but I do want to say that's where the sutta starts. But then he gets to this question of views, which is really, really fascinating. And so he says this. He says, one does not say, okay, and I would add, a skillful one, that's what he's talking about, a skillful person, does not say, all those engaged in the pursuit of self-mortification have entered upon the wrong way. Okay, but wait a minute. He just said that that's not the way to practice, that that's not the middle way. So then what? So then he clarifies. He says, but one says instead, a skillful one says instead, the pursuit of self-mortification is a state beset by suffering, by despair, and it is going in the wrong way. And then one describes the Dhamma. Yeah. And so, likewise, he says, those who have taken up other kinds of practices that are unskillful, we don't say all of those beings have entered upon the wrong way. But we say instead, as long as that type of behavior is not abandoned, then that suffering that goes with that, or that difficulty, that attachment that goes with that, is not abandoned. And so I hope that you're seeing very clearly the distinction that the Buddha is making here, right? Which is the distinction between disparaging human beings, or abandoning human beings and saying, oh, those people that behave like that, those folks are messed up. And saying, that kind of behavior, these kinds of choices, fostering these qualities in the mind of greed and hatred and delusion, that's going to cause difficulty. That's not what I choose to do with my life. I hope that you can see why you wouldn't want to choose that in your life. And you engage with people from the standpoint of separating the view and the behavior from the person themselves. And this is very hard to do. It can sometimes be very hard to do. Because for one, it requires a degree of courage. It requires a degree of courage about what it is that you believe, right? If you just cut off the people who disagree with you, then you're not confronted with having to stand in your own place. Sometimes this would happen even in Zen communities. I was quite aware of this sometimes when I lived in certain parts of the world where I only came into contact with folks who had a similar kind of view about Buddhism, about practice, about politics, about whatever, right? But that doesn't take any courage, right? The real courage is to actually stay engaged with the folks that don't agree or don't see it the same way or might be confused about you or about what you stand for, or about what's going on in the world. So it takes a fair amount of courage and steadiness, right? And the steadiness. Because you might not be met with that same skillfulness. You might be met, in fact, with people who want to harm you. And the Buddha sets, and Buddhism in general, sets a very high bar with regard to that. That even people who want to harm you are not folks that you should disparage. You need to set some boundaries. It's not that we don't need boundaries. But we learn how not to cut people off. There's a very funny story. I'm all full of Zen stories today, Mahayana stories. So there's a very beautiful story in the Lotus Sutta. So the Lotus Sutta is a sutra that was developed right around the start of the Common Era, plus or minus, 200 years. And is one of the foundational teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. And Mahayana, it's in part because it's a teaching that tries to unite people, different factions within Buddhism that were occurring at the time. So it's called the Sutta of the One Vehicle sometimes. But there are lots of different parables. The reason why the Lotus Sutta became very beloved, I believe, is because there are lots of interesting parables in the Lotus Sutta. And there's a parable about a bodhisattva. So what's a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is a being who has made a commitment to help all beings to awaken, to be enlightened, to be free of suffering, free of dukkha. And so there's this bodhisattva, and the bodhisattva is, confident that beings will eventually choose to give up suffering. So he's going around saying to everybody, oh, you will be a Buddha in the future. I know you will. And some people are not so pleased about that. So they start throwing rocks at him, at the bodhisattva. And so what does the sutta say? The sutta says the bodhisattva runs away to a safe distance And he continues saying, no, no, but I know that you will one day choose to give up suffering and become a Buddha. And so he's called the Bodhisattva, never disparaging. Never disparaging. So it's not that you don't run to a safe distance if you need to, right? It's not that we are being totally impractical here. But it is this tremendous generosity of heart. Tremendous generosity of heart. And we can do it. We can, I promise you, we can do this. You know, there's another story that I want to tell you. And this one always brings tears to my eyes, so bear with me. But this is a story that is about a young woman in DeKalb County, Georgia. A number of years ago, I think this happened back in 2014. And she worked in an elementary school. She worked in the office of an elementary school there, just outside of Atlanta. And one day, a young man, very confused, very upset young man, came in with a machine gun and said, I'm going to kill all these kids. I'm upset, and I'm going to kill you too. And her name is Antoinette Tuff, Tuff. Her name is Antoinette Tuff. And Antoinette happened to be sitting at the desk, because that actually wasn't her desk. She normally wasn't the first person greeting people coming in the door, but it was her karma that day to be seated at the desk when this young person came in. And so she asked him his name. And she said, well, tell me more. What's happening? Why are you here? And he continued to be upset and started shooting bullets up into the ceiling. No, no, no. I'm not here to talk to you. And so what did she do? She got quiet for a minute. This is how she tells it. She got quiet for a minute, and then she started telling him about her difficulties in her life. She said, I know what it's like to be confused and to be troubled. My husband divorced me, and I'm a single mom trying to raise kids, and so many struggles. She talked about the struggles of her life. And then she asked him, well, so what? It sounds like you're really upset. And he said, yeah. And he just kept saying, yes, I'm so confused, and I'm so angry, and I'm so confused, and I'm so angry. And she's like, I get it. Confused, angry. It happens. It happens to all of us. And she kept talking to him and talking to him. Eventually, he let her get on the phone to the police who were outside. And eventually, she talked him into putting the gun down. And she said, don't worry, honey, don't worry. I'll stay with you when they arrest you. So you'll be okay. And she did. She stayed until they took him off to jail. And to this day, he thanks her for what she did for him. That she stayed with him as a person. This person who wanted to kill her, who was very clearly intent on harming not only her, but other people. And when they asked her afterwards, why did she do this? What was going through her mind? She didn't say, oh, I was trying to be the hero, or, I was really angry at him, or, She said, no, she said, I thought about what I was taught in church, that you should be nice to everybody. You should try to talk to people, be with people in their worst moments. So this is called the Sutta of non-conflict. the exposition on non-conflict, this sutta. About how we can find our skill and our willingness, our courage, and our generosity of heart to know what we think is right and wrong, and not let that cut us off from other people. The Buddha doesn't say, oh, just anything goes. On the contrary, right? On the contrary, Buddhism is a very ethical tradition. Ethics, he said, is very important. Making good choices, non-harmful choices, is a very important part of our lives. But just because he stood for making those good choices doesn't mean that he gave up on the people who couldn't do that. And nor should we. So, if anything, I would wish you great clarity about your views. And great courage to know how to be that bodhisattva, that one whose real commitment is to wholesome care for everyone. So thank you. All right, friends, so that is what I wanted to share with you today. And despite the fact that I can't seem to put my finger on the second microphone, we will have time now for comments and questions and reflections. Folks who are in the room or folks who are online. Yes, Deborah, hold on here. If you wouldn't mind taking the mic, okay? So the little round part is the top of it, is the actual microphone.
So I just
Yeah.
thank you, Aya, for that very timely talk. It was beautifully, it was very, very helpful. My question is on another of the Buddhist teachings, which is that if you want to become wiser, hang out with wise people. And so I'm wondering about how this applies. I can see in a general sense, of course, all of the others, we don't want to other them. And they have their Buddha nature as well. And we don't want to close ourselves off. And then we do have to have boundaries. But say you have someone who's in your family or a friend who's very strongly in that other perspective. And you don't necessarily want to be hanging out with that. Where do you draw the line? How do you address that dilemma?
Yeah. Thanks, Deborah. It's a good question. And I think that the discernment there is about whether it's causing harm to you, right? So when the Buddha says we need to hang out with wise people, we definitely need to hang out with wise people, in part so that we're hearing different perspectives, in part so that we feel some camaraderie, if that's our aspiration, right, to develop that kind of wisdom. And to develop some strength in that, right? Some using meditative experiences also to bring some stability, right? So like practicing the Brahma viharas to foster some equanimity, for example. But once that stability is developed, and once that clarity is developed, then it's like that. Then there's more and more capacity to be encountering other situations or other views or other types, other people with different types of views without being swayed by it. The reason why the Buddha has so much emphasis on hanging out with wise people is because he knows that we are often influenced by who we're hanging out with, right? But then once you have that grounding in the wholesomeness, then it becomes a matter again of, is it causing you harm or is it causing you suffering, dukkha, right? I think it was Ram Dass, who's not a Buddhist, but actually a Hindu practitioner, I believe, who said, yeah, if you think you're enlightened, go hang out with your family for Thanksgiving. Right? So if that's too painful, then don't go hang out with your family for Thanksgiving, right? If that's too painful or if it just causes too much agitation, then you have to say, okay, maybe I'm not ready to deal with that, or I'm not willing to tolerate that kind of suffering. Just like the Bodhisattva never disparaged, right? He's not going to stand there and let himself be stoned. He's going to go to a place where he has less suffering and still keeping that same view. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, please. Okay. Pass the mic over there. Thanks, Dick. Please say your name so folks online know.
My name is Morgan, and I'm curious if you could articulate the dividing line from asceticism to the middle way, because to some degree it seems that asceticism reflects a discipline. So how do we separate those two things?
Yeah, so this is a very important and kind of subtle question. And indeed, I would say that even what the Buddha meant by the middle way would feel quite ascetic to most of us, the way that we live currently in modern times and in our particular, socioeconomic situation. I know we have people on different parts of that spectrum within the Sangha, but nonetheless, many of us here in the West live in a fairly comfortable, much more comfortable situation than even what the Buddha meant by the middle way. And so I think it is really it's a matter of exploration of you could think of it in terms of like setting things down. When is it that setting something down actually brings relief versus a rejection in some way or a grasping in some way, right? So finding that balance is how to find the appropriate state of renunciation for your particular situation at that particular point in your life. It often changes for people over time. For myself, it has changed many times, going into states of much more renunciation or states of a little bit less. But for me anyway, that's one of the ways that I've explored it, is to say, okay, maybe I'm willing to set down dinner. Not that I'm saying you need to do this, Morgan, but maybe I'm willing to just set down dinner for a while and see if that practice, which is one of the practices that folks do on retreat, for example, sometimes people would take it up just for a week and say, okay, I'm going to try not eating dinner for this whole week while I'm on retreat, and see if that feels supportive to my practice or feels like it just becomes, much more suffering, much more problematic for me. you know? And that's how I would approach it. I wouldn't dare say that there is one particular type of renunciation for everyone, or even for groups of people, even for particular groups of monastics or lay people in general. It's really very much an individual exploration. But again, it has to do with this kind of aversion or seeking after, right? So if you, a good friend of mine, who will go unnamed, is very fond of pancakes. And one time I gave a talk where I was talking about eating too many pancakes, and he totally was cracking up, because he was like, right, I get it, the first one, you eat the first one, and it's like, yeah, it's a pancake, right? Okay, great, it's yummy. And then you have the second one, and like, okay, nice. Maybe a third one would be good. Third one, and by then he's like, he's thinking about the fourth one, but then hopefully he realizes, oh, right, the fourth one might not be quite so pleasant as that first one. Hopefully we stop to realize that, So then you renounce the fourth pancake. Kind of like that. Yeah? Okay, great.
I just so appreciate how, keeping with Zen phrases, I think of stop getting lost in the leaves and branches and go for the root. And the Buddha keeps coming back to the root, pointing us back to suffering and just given the current environment that we're in, both natural environment and political and economic and all the rest, how important that is. People say, well, it's like wanting to force metta, karuna, and mudita, but not having equanimity. And and even, I mean, right now, I think I'm going to shut down Facebook for a couple of weeks till things calm down, because you can't say anything without upsetting somebody. And sometimes you think, well, so what's a skillful way to respond here? And that whatever response you're going to give is going to bring a horde of trolls down on you. So sometimes the best thing, unfortunately, sometimes the wisest thing has to just be silence, just to kind of be willing to let some things go, rather than try to get into an online debate or something. Just thinking of Ajahn Suchito saying something very important, that a screen does not have empathy. And it's really hard to, if I'm sitting face to face with somebody, my response is probably going to be a lot more appropriate than just saying a few words in cyberspace. So it's all, there are so many different dimensions to this right now that, and some of it is frankly terrifying. Even, I mean, people who are Buddhists have opinions, perceptions ranging across a huge, and it's already, I mean, I'm seeing, some very well-known teachers calling each other's names publicly. It's pretty awful. Anyway,
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that out So,
Thanks, Brad. Thank you. No, I mean, the reflection about, that it is scary and it is painful and it is difficult to know about right speech right now. So just also a reminder of the attributes of right speech, right? The attributes of right speech are, is it true? Is it beneficial? Is it spoken in goodwill?
right.
Is it timely?
Mhm.
Timely,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Timely. So the Buddha said very clearly, if you have to say something, if there is something that's going to be said that isn't going to be well received by that person, the listener, maybe I'll talk about this next week, that's better, it's best to find the right time for that. You don't just kind of blurt it out because you think that it's the right time,
Yeah.
but that's actually a very important aspect of discernment. So great. Thank you for bringing that up, Brad. All right, Dana, I think it's time for announcements, final announcements, and then I'll dedicate the merit at the end.
Thank you. The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadipa, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab. So there are many ways: donate financially, volunteer your time, or offer material support. In addition, about once a month, we send an email communication about meditation, class, and retreat schedules. You can subscribe on the homepage. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you so much. So Dana's the president of the board and a long time friend and great supporter of the Vihara. So thank you, Dana, for all that you do. And for everyone who's supporting the
welcome.
Vihara in a variety of ways. And one last thing is that I didn't mention at the beginning that December 8th, so December 8th is the day that the Buddha's enlightenment is celebrated in the Japanese Zen tradition. Mind you that in the Theravada tradition, in most of the Theravada countries, the day of the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and death, or passage into Mahaparinibbana, is all celebrated on the same day, which is Wesak, and usually in May. But maybe more opportunities for cake. I'm not really sure why in the Zen tradition, it's divided up into 3 separate opportunities. So December 8th is called Rohatsu. It's the day that we celebrate. And that happens to be a Sunday. So we'll have a brunch. We'll have a little bit of a brief ceremony. Maybe we'll have some, I don't know what, maybe we'll have a matinee. I was thinking, oh, that'd be a good start to our Dharma movies. We could have a Dharma movie. And anyway, so that is another opportunity to get together. So with much appreciation for all the beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen, far and near, who are practicing together with us, and for all beings, that all beings might find deep release from dukkha, from the unfulfilling, painful aspects of life, and that we all might find deep compassion and peace in our hearts. By the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and each one's efforts, may all beings be free. Okay, everyone, good to see you. Bye-bye.